So this is an introduction to Coaching Corner. We're going to have Suzanne Payne, who's going to be explaining a bit more about the techniques involved in coaching. But just as a brief introduction, we realised last year really that most of our engagement with students was reactive. So we were responding when they were asking questions, whereas we wanted to be proactive and engaging more proactively with more initiative with the student body. Second thing we realised was that the majority of our communication was via email, although we do have drop-in hours, and so there was some one-to-one work there. But when students would drop in, they'd often come in as individuals from committee, and therefore what was communicated by myself or another member of staff might not get passed on to the whole rest of the committee. And so what we wanted to do was to create something that engaged proactively with the whole committee in a personal way, rather than via email or in just a generic training session, but something that was specifically tailored to their society. And what we came up with was this idea which we've called Coaching Corner, where you get the whole committee together, you listen to what their specific issues are, you engage with them personally and proactively, so that you can solve issues before they become crises. And Suzanne's going to talk a bit about why we do this and how we do it.
So this session is aimed at society executive who will be involved in Coach's Corner. Hopefully it will give you some useful skills that you can use for those sessions, but also something that you'll find useful for you to use later in life when you move on to your future careers. So starting off, we'll just start to look at the aims of this session today. So the purpose of this is to understand the purpose of coaching, learn the coaching process. So it's about understanding exactly what takes you through the necessary steps. We're going to consider effective goal setting, which is an important part of the coaching process. And then in order to do that, you'll need to just practice your questioning and listening skills, so we'll be looking at that again. So what is the role of a coach? So overall it's about identifying where people are now, where they want to be, and looking at ways of how to get there. In order to do that, you need to ask questions and identify solutions and actions. And it's not about telling somebody what to do, it's about encouraging them to come up with those ideas. You'll be looking at helping them to set goals and ways of assessing progress towards those goals. It's about looking at steps that will take them towards the end goal. Whilst we've now looked at what a coach is, it's also useful to have a look at actually what coaching isn't. So it isn't about telling people what to do. It's certainly not about being a counsellor or a therapist. And it's not about setting goals on their behalf. As I mentioned before, it's very much about them coming up with their own ideas and solutions. So now going on to look at the process. So the first step is to make sure that you meet in the right environment. Now I think for Coaching Corner you meet in the Student Media Centre, and I'm well aware that that can actually be often a very busy place. So you actually need to think about perhaps finding the right space. Is it noisy? Does this person really want somewhere where they can sit quietly? So you might need to find a quiet corner somewhere. Set boundaries. So it's really useful in the first place to actually consider chatting through the things that we've just looked at. What is the role of the coach? What are you there to do? What aren't you there to do? How much time have you got available? It's useful just to have that conversation at the outset. It's about asking questions, and that's the most important part of the process. As I've mentioned, it's not about you telling them what to do, it's more about you asking the questions in the right way. Obviously, when you've asked a question, it's important then to go on and fully listen to the answer. And I think that's something that all of us sometimes do, is we're more intent on thinking about the next question that we're going to ask, rather than listening to the answer that we're being given. So we'll go on to look at that further on, but it's just important to make note of that at this point. And then for you, the process is to help set goals. And the idea is that by the end of your meeting, you'll have made some agreements, you'll have set some clearly defined goals, and there'll be some actions that that person will go away with. Now, for that process that I've just looked at, it's useful just to consider a model which is called the GROW model. And if we go on and have a look at the stages of that GROW model, it starts with G is for goal, reality, O for options, and then the final one is W, which is for will, or what next, basically. So starting with goal. So the first part of the process is to find out exactly what they want to achieve. So it's about using those questioning skills to identify the issues. Exactly what do they want to do? And sometimes what they come up with is actually what they don't want. So through those questioning skills you can find out exactly what they're wanting to achieve. And then it's important to actually clarify the focus for the meeting. So by setting the goal, you actually know what you're going to be focusing on and looking at over that meeting period. The next step is the reality. So it's about finding out what the situation is now. You can offer specific feedback examples, so it might well be, whilst you're not telling them what to do, you can actually be feeding back to them and reflecting on what they're talking about. One important point is not to make assumptions. It's very easy for us to fill gaps and think that we understand things fully, but always use those questioning skills to make sure that you ask and find out about the real situation. And it's important that during the course of the conversation, if things aren't irrelevant, you just put those to one side. You could use up a lot of time getting caught up in details that don't really matter. The next stage, O, is for options. And here it's about getting the person that you're working with to think about what their options might be. Come up with suggestions. Make sure that you cover a full range of options. Encourage them to think about everything from every perspective. If you're going to offer suggestions, be cautious with that. Make sure that you aren't telling them what to do, that you're just guiding them. And ensure that before you move on to the next stage, that choices have been made and you've both agreed on something that is going to take them towards their goal. So on to the last section, which is will, or what next. So how committed are they to these actions? How committed are they to the end goal? It's worth you using again those questioning skills just to identify possible obstacles. What might be the problems that they might need to overcome? Can they be overcome? Is that achievable to expect that? Think about the support that might be needed. That might be some resources that they may need, or it may be practical support from perhaps a member of staff or somebody else within their group or society. And then it's about planning actions. So make sure that before you finish the meeting that some key actions have been planned and you've got timescales against those. That will be really something that's very constructive for them to go away with. So we've covered the actual process itself, looking at GROW and the 4 steps involved in that process. I've mentioned the questioning situation, and I think it's important now just to look at a good method of asking questions. So something that you're probably familiar with are open questions, but it's really important that you do ask open questions. So questions that don't prompt purely a yes or no answer. That encourages them to think more about the situation, but also provides you with more information. Ask them for opinions, thoughts and feelings. It's not necessarily just about facts. Get them to think beyond that. That's when things can become really, really useful and really productive. Explore all their ideas. Just again, look at things from different perspectives, consider people's different views. That will come up with lots more constructive ideas. Along the way, you need to consider the barriers and potential problems. Encourage them to just consider what might be a stumbling block along the way, or something that might hinder them actually achieving their goal. And then fully evaluate the chances of success and failure. You know, how realistic is their goal? And the one point at the bottom that I sort of alluded to earlier, which is when you ask a question, make sure that you listen to the answer. So in terms of those listening skills, Again, that's why the environment is really, really important. You know, if you've not chosen the right place to sit and have a conversation, if you can't really hear what they're saying, that's going to be really, really difficult for you and for them as well, because obviously they want to be listening to you. Remember body language. As we all know, body language says it all, and even if you think that you're being attentive, if there's something happening and out of the corner of your eye you're looking at what's going on, they'll know, and that's not really very encouraging or supportive. It's useful just to check as you go through that your understanding is correct. It's useful just to summarise perhaps along the way the things that they've been saying, just to make sure at key points that you're on track with everything. And also at the end of the meeting, it's always really useful to actually summarise the things that you've discussed, the actions that you've agreed, and what will be happening next. And with that in mind, I'll summarise this session today. So just make sure that you have the time available and that the setting is right. Find out exactly what they want to achieve. Use those questioning skills to ask the right questions. Make sure you're listening. Ask those open questions and don't tell them what to do. Always check out the current situation as your starting point. That's basically what you need to establish before you move forward with plans. And then make sure you consider a range of options. Ask as many questions as you can, as I mentioned, to look at things from every perspective and consider every problem or hindrance that might come along the way. And then finally end with setting a clearly defined goal. Make sure that you both understand exactly what the goal is, the actions that need to be taken, and those milestones and the key dates along the way. Thank you very much for listening to this session today. Should you have any more queries or feedback or ideas relating to coaching, you can get in touch with either Tom Curry or Daniel Hatfield in the Student Activities Office.
Yes, I'm stuck in the middle with you.